Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by Mr. Hugo Tong. Now, Hugo graduated from PET in 2014. He then went on to study business at Ivy Business School at Western University. And after graduating from Ivy, he now works in Budapest at McKinsey & Co. Please excuse the audio and video in this episode, but without any further ado, we'll jump right into it with some of Hugo's favorite high school memories.
Yeah, so I did a lot of
Okay.
extracurriculars in high school, but
hmm
definitely a lot of music. I had a lot of fun there.
hmm
I don't know if the teachers are still there, but they were awesome.
hmm
Is like Mr. Colley and all those other guys still there? Those guys were
hmm
amazing.
They are. They are. hmm
Oh, that's awesome.
Um,
Some of the
yeah.
best teachers I think in the world, honestly, just care so much
hmm
and really passionate about what they teach. Anyways,
hmm
yes, then
Okay.
basically I graduated, had a few options of things that I wanted to do, so applied to a few different programs across a few different universities. In the end, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I kept the thing that was kind of the most open, which was going to Western. I initially studied MIT, like Media, Information, and
hmm
Technoculture, which is basically just the study of the social side of studying kind of media, information, and technology. At that point, still wasn't sure if I wanted to go to Ivy, but knew that was told by everyone that it's a great path, it'll set you up, whatever. Luckily got in, went with no preconceived notions of what I wanted to do, if I was interested in business at all, whatever. Went through the Ivy experience and then graduated, and it
hmm
was great.
Very, yeah, very cool. Did you kind of, like, was it like Western always for you, or was it more like I want to do MIT at Western? Like, how did you decide, what to do right after high school?
Yeah, so basically I applied to, like the way that I did was that I applied to a different type of program at a different university. So I applied to Western for MIT and Ivy. I applied to McGill for poli sci. I applied to Waterloo for like environment and business. So basically I didn't really have like, I had a broad range of things, but they were all split across the different universities. And as I mentioned before, I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I wanted to just choose the thing that kept the path the most open. And that ended up kind of being the path of MIT and then potentially Ivy. Also, I really liked the school.
hmm
So I visited the school and I
Yeah.
was like, I would like
Okay.
to live here for 4 years.
Oh, okay. Really? I usually, when I interview people from Western, usually it's a bit of a culture shock, just like the difference between, going to school like Pet and then going to Western. Was there like a culture shock for you?
I think so for sure. I think it's definitely a bit of a culture shock. I mean, I think like Pet can be a bit of like an insular community, right? Like even Markham itself is kind of a very insular and unique type of community across even the GTA. So there was definitely a bit of culture shock, but I don't think it was like anything super crazy for me, luckily. The
Yeah,
crazier
I
culture shock was
yeah.
a bit like going to Ivy, honestly. Like um
hmm
I think there was like a level of there was like people I'd never really interacted before, people from like a very vast range of cultures and that were like super international, and that was a bit more of a culture shock for me than going to Western in the first place.
Would you say that Ivy is almost cutthroat in a way?
So I actually thought it was going to be, I think it can be a bit cutthroat to get in. I think once you're in, then it's actually like the community is really, really good. I was expecting a bit more like PvP, like people kind of not wanting to help you because they want to help themselves. But I actually felt none of that. Now, maybe that was because I got into a great section where everybody was really well
hmm
connected. But like I would say going into Ivy, I was probably the least motivated and least excited about business because I was just like, let me just go to this because everybody said it was great. And I really like needed the help and appreciated the help that I got from anyone and everyone that I asked a question to.
Yeah. What section were you in?
I was in section, what was the section was I in? Section seven? I don't even remember. I need to check. I think
Oh,
section
seven.
seven.
Okay. How many sec? Yeah, because now they have 10 sections, I think, which is a little bit different
Oh wow.
from when you were there. Yeah, I think it was like eight back then, probably.
Exactly. Yeah, it was eight.
Yeah. So now we have 10, which doesn't even fit in the auditorium anymore, which is kind of funny. Yeah, but we talked a little bit offline. You mentioned that you kind of went through a bit of a crisis near the end. There's kind of a big scramble at the end in your last year where I'm at to kind of find a job and things like that. What was your experience kind of like coming to the end and like scrambling for a job like?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I had kind of like a decent internship um, in like between HBA1 and HBA2, so third and fourth year. It was in kind of internal audit, and I realized there very quickly that that is definitely not what I want to do going forward. And at that point, I didn't really have any notions of what I actually wanted to do, right? Like I was like happy to do anything and everything. So I applied to a few jobs, didn't really take it that seriously. Obviously got rejected from all of them. And luckily I was kind of going on exchange in my last semester. So that was like a nice break where I was like, okay, let me just do this. I'll travel a bit and then I'll figure it out kind of once I come back. Um, so I kind of was really like away from all of that while that was happening. So for me, it was like very not that stressful, I would say. I think similar thing in for me in high school, right? Like I realized I wasn't very good at math and science, so I didn't take much math and science, and so I kind of took a what people may consider kind of easy courses. So it was like while everyone else was stressing, for me it was like kind of relatively stress free.
Mhm. How do you kind of like navigate that whole like pressure, system? I know at PET, a lot of people's main criticism is it's very like there's a lot of pressure, right? How do you kind of deal with everyone else feeling that pressure and you kind of like, taking a step back and like relaxing a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I think there's a few things, right? So one, it's not that I didn't, I still felt some pressure, right? And I think PET probably compared to other high schools is one that is it's full of high achievers, right? Everyone's trying to do the greatest things, go to the best universities, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it can be extra tough in PET to kind of step away from that stuff. But I think it was just kind of like reminding myself that like at the end of the day, like if you're a year late, if you start a year later than everyone else, it's not the end of the world, right? Take the time to do the things that you want to do and make the decisions you want when you're young, because as you get older and older, it becomes more and more difficult, right? And I think
Mhm.
now, even in my like current job at McKinsey, there's a lot of people who join after a few years of experience. There's a lot of people who join from the entry level roles at 30, right? And I think it just kind of reinforces the fact that kind of everyone takes separate and different paths to their end goal, and it's not a rush, right? It's more important to kind of like enjoy your life, and you'll get there eventually. And I've never had, I think my life has always been one where I've never really
Right.
had a plan. So I've always needed to kind of trust the process in a sense. And like luckily it hasn't failed me since. And I've been kind of falling in place and taking advantage of random opportunities that have come up. And it's led me to what I think is like a good place.
Yeah, I really like that advice. It's kind of a common theme. A lot of us, feel that pressure. So I'm glad you touched on, separating yourself from the pressure, running your own race, really at the end of the day. I find it interesting that you say that you didn't really have an idea of what you want to do, but you end up at a very prestigious firm like McKinsey. How did that whole process play out, especially, working in a different country in Europe?
Yeah, so let me take you from where I stopped my journey to where I am now.
Mhm.
So I kind of won an exchange. I went to Belgium. When I was in Belgium, again, had no conceptions of what I wanted to do. The one thing that I knew for sure I didn't want to do was banking and consulting, funnily enough, because of like all the case prep and all the interviews. And I think that was like a little place in Ivy where there was like a bit of contention where people weren't as like willing to help each other in a sense. And so at that time I was like, I'm not doing either of these things because super competitive, like very cutthroat. I don't want to be in that kind of environment. And so I basically, while I was in Belgium, I ended up meeting a Hungarian girl, decided to just move to Hungary after my exchange, partly because like I wanted to experience it. I think also partly a little bit, I didn't want to kind of become an adult yet. So I moved there, didn't even go back to Canada in the middle, and just took my suitcase and went. Didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I just taught English for a year. I think a bit of a non-traditional path for typically people who kind of go into consulting, but I taught English for a year. And then just in that year, I ended up meeting somebody and becoming friends with somebody who was at McKinsey, who was not cutthroat, who was more kind of relaxed. He told me a little bit more about it. And after some convincing, he said I should apply. I knew that after teaching for a year, I wanted to do something else. I still at that point didn't know what I wanted to do. He referred me. It was had a great interview. It was actually the first thing that I applied for, the only thing I applied for. And then luckily I kind of got that job. So it was like, again, like happy little accident that kind of led me the way that led me to where I was. And if I had kind of stayed in Toronto and like kept that preconceived notion I had of banking and consulting or whatever, I don't think I would have ended up in the same place.
So, you work at McKinsey, which is, a huge global, consulting firm, a huge name in the business world. And even still in business school, a lot of people, ask, what exactly do consultants do? And you're a senior associate, senior solutions associate, right?
Yeah, I guess I need to
How
change
would
my
you
LinkedIn
kind of break it
anymore.
down?
I think I think I get this question a lot. Probably most consultants get this a lot, but I think the easy way to kind of answer it is that big businesses have problems, right? And they don't necessarily know how to solve them. Whether it's questions like, what product should I launch next? Or what should I do with my current product? Or how can I increase my marketing spend? Things like that. They're big questions that require a lot of thinking behind them. And so what consultants do is they help you think through those problems, bring in additional information that you may not have. For example, I can go speak to somebody who has done this before. I can speak to an expert in the industry, et cetera, and kind of bring all this information together and help you make that decision.
Yeah. Do you have any, favorite projects, without giving away, anything under NDA? Do you have any projects that stand out for you?
Yeah, so I'll say I'm a bit of like I'm in like a special role, so I'm not in kind of like the super prestigious generalist role. I'm in a solutions role, which basically means I do a few things. So one is I specialize in a topic in where I serve clients just like a normal consultant would, but I also kind of internally build knowledge and build kind of products within McKinsey that can then be deployed to clients. And my focus has always been on ecosystem strategy or innovation and really helping clients kind of figure out what they may want to do in terms of new products outside of what they normally do. So a bank may want to do something outside of banking. A telecommunications company may want to do something that's not telecommunications, right? So a lot of my work is focusing on these kind of cool, innovative things, helping them think bigger and broader than what they typically do. And that's been really great. So I've worked with clients on all continents of the world now. Um, what are some cool projects I did? I recently did actually kind of a cool tech rollout of an internal product to a big insurance company in the US. I worked with a couple cool Canadian brands on helping them develop their kind of ecosystem strategy or figuring out how they can create kind of cool digital products. So I'd say those two projects, kind of working with brands that are kind of close to home that you kind of grow up with, was quite cool.
So it sounds like you have, a huge variety of, knowledge. The breadth and the depth of your knowledge seems to be quite extensive, right? What are kind of the biggest, skills that have helped you succeed, or like what do you consider most important in your role?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things, right? So I think one important for all jobs, but particularly in consulting, is people skills, right? So knowing how to speak with somebody, knowing how to actively listen, knowing how to manage all the different stakeholders within a project or within your kind of sphere of influence, I think is like the most important skill, soft skill that I think Ivy does a really good job of teaching, by the way. um, that is critical, right? Because consulting at the end of the day is a people business. There's always people talking about, AI is going to replace consulting. And I think while it is going to support consulting, AI will never be able to kind of have that one-on-one conversation with you. They'll never be able to kind of understand the way that you're feeling and be able to kind of massage the message in the right way, right? So I think the people skills is super, super important. I think the second thing is a bit learning under like time management and learning how to prioritize, right? I think also relevant in many jobs, but in consulting in particular, there's a million and one things that you could be doing at that point, and it's really important to know what's the thing that's going to drive the most value for you immediately, right? There's just not enough hours in the day to do everything. So I would say that's very important. And I think three is just being very naturally curious, right? I think consulting tends to attract those types of people given the nature of the work where you're kind of jumping from project to project to project. But I think kind of keeping that curiosity and keeping that drive, even as you stay in the firm for X amount of years, I think is super, super important.
I really like, all those points. I think those are, very applicable to a wide range of, even outside consulting. I think those are very applicable.
100%.
How do you kind of, yeah, do you do you kind of have any points on maybe like navigating, working in an international office? I would imagine the culture there might be a little bit different than in Canada.
Yeah, so I think that's like really interesting. That's a really like interesting point, right? I think like having also worked with clients from all over the world, you really do kind of see these different cultural aspects kind of permeate in a sense, and like certain offices in certain regions have certain reputations, sometimes true, sometimes not true. But I think for me, what really helped was a bit like getting international experience and living abroad before entering like an international workplace. And I think just being a bit like cognizant and understanding of where people are coming from and how things operate, right? For example, Hungary or Budapest was like previously a communist country, has lost many wars, and so doesn't have necessarily that hope and optimism that like people in North America do, right? Like that Canadians, Americans might have. Additionally, Europeans don't speak as loudly as Canadians and Americans do, right? And I think just understanding these things and calibrating a bit your expectations is super important, right? A Hungarian person will only say, this is the best thing I've ever seen, if it is actually the best thing they've ever seen. But in North America, people will say that's the best thing they've ever seen, and that will be like a 7 out of 10, right? So it's a bit like being cognizant and just recognizing these things and then adjusting your expectations so that you don't feel like disappointed or that you don't feel whatever hurt by the way that somebody says or something that somebody says.
Hmm. And I'm really curious. You took French immersion in high school. You mentioned the kind of culture shock a little bit when you went to Ivy. You went on that exchange in Belgium. Would you say that you've always kind of wanted to explore different cultures, or was it something that you kind of developed along the way?
Yeah, I think I mean I was really lucky because my parents always kind of made it a big point of emphasis that we would travel and they really wanted to show me a bunch of different cultures. So for example, even as a kid, they like made me play hockey. They made me go do all these things in these uncomfortable environments just so I can meet as many diverse sets of people that I possibly could. And so even before that, I already kind of developed the love and the thirst for travel and meeting new cultures, etc., because my parents kind of instilled it in me.
Looking ahead, do you have any other places that you might want to work in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always open options. I mean, I will say that even though I've now been working consulting for 5 years, I don't even know, I still don't know what I really want to do at the end of the day or what my like super calling card is, which I think is also a common story for people in consulting. But I mean, I'd always there's always like the possibility, to go back to Toronto where go back to Markham or, go east out to Asia or explore other places in Europe. I mean, at this point, I've spent basically like my entire adult life in Budapest. So I think there is a whole big world out there. And it's all if another opportunity comes, then always happy to take that.
Mhm. So I'm glad you talked on, this idea of, kind of spreading your wings and, spending your adult life somewhere completely else, right? So if you could kind of like, pitch the idea to someone is on the fence about, working internationally, what would your kind of like main pitch be to them?
Yeah, so I would say a few things, right? So one, you're not going to have these opportunities forever. When you have kids, when you have a family, it's going to be difficult, right? You're never, and when you have a mortgage, these things are difficult, right? So when you have no ties, no responsibilities, now's the time to go. I think second, for me personally, I don't think if I hadn't lived abroad, I would be the person I am today because kind of putting yourself out there and going to a completely unfamiliar place and stepping out of your comfort zone really helps develop a lot of those intangible skills, right? Building a new network, learning how to operate in a new place, understanding these cultural differences that will serve you super well no matter where you are, um, is like going abroad is like the easiest and fastest way to kind of pick those things up. And I think third, life is just like short. Toronto and Markham's
Oh,
always going to be
yeah.
there. And so like if you lose a couple of years of let's say career growth, going to do something fun, I think at the end of the day, I always try to think from this perspective, right? Like when I'm on my deathbed, what will I actually remember and what will I think fondly of? And I don't think when you're not going to go back and think about those first 2 years you were working, you'll more fondly remember that time you went to go live in Botswana or whatever. And that's, I think, why you should do it, or if you were considering it, um, what could be the reason why you might want to do that.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of like in a similar vein, I really like, Ivy. We talked a lot. It's a great school. If you were trying to like convince someone that Ivy, they should totally apply to Ivy, what would you kind of say?
Yeah, so I think it's a few things, right? So one, I think it's really exceptional people, right? And I think being surrounded by exceptional people makes you more exceptional. I think two, what Ivy is really good at because of the case study, whatever method, is that it really trains those skills that are going to be relevant for you no matter what job you're in, right? So I think what Ivy really taught me is a lot of the things which I mentioned when it came to like what made me successful in consulting or what like makes a good consultant, right? It does a lot, focuses a lot on the soft skills, focuses a lot about teaching you how to learn and apply and problem solve and apply problem solving, right? And third, it doesn't necessarily focus too much on kind of textbook hard skills or memorization. It really focuses on, again, applying those skills, applying new bits of information that you're picking up along the way in as quick of a way as possible and being able to communicate that. And for those reasons, I think Ivy is like a particularly good program in that sense compared to like other more, let's say, traditional, even business school programs that may have some elements of case study, but then also have, this rote memorization, this textbook, this advanced theory, which I think is interesting and important. But I think for your average kind of management consultant or for the average person who doesn't necessarily want to go super deep into the quant necessarily, it's going to be a more valuable, useful, and like frankly, more fun way of learning.
And I think to add on, they have that, 2+2 system where you mentioned that, you weren't really sure what you wanted to do before you studied MIT before. So I think that flexibility is also a big plus for Ivy, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So to close up a little bit, you mentioned that, you're not sure if, this is for your forever plan, rightly so. But outside of like work, do you have any like future aspirations, whether it be like traveling, volunteering, going back to school, maybe opening your own shop? Do you have any future aspirations that we can look forward to seeing from you?
Oh, wow. I live my life with no plan up until now, so I will not say I have a strong plan, but I think doing more traveling, I think that's always like a guiding compass, right? So whatever can enable you to travel in a way that to travel the most, I think is important, which I think consulting is nice at, right? Getting airdropped into random places is always very nice. I think finding ways to be a bit more creative. I think one thing that I do miss about university and that I do miss about high school is this like ability to not be sitting at a computer for upwards of 50 hours a week. So trying to find more ways to kind of stay away from a computer, I think is something that I aspire to do. And hopefully just finding a bit more of what I'm particularly interested in and what I would like to specialize in. I think I've done a lot of generalized elements. I've done a lot of things at a general level, right? As in consulting, but hopefully finding something and really deep diving into that would be great.
I saw in high school you were in the, was it Animal Rights Club or something to do with that?
Yeah, I was in a lot of clubs
Yeah.
in high school, which I think is an important thing that everyone should do. If you're in high school, join some
hmm
clubs.
Is that still a cause that's close to your heart? Something you want to, carry with you?
Yeah, I think it always is, right? I mean, who can I think there's a lot of animals that need help. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to kind of do that now, but still a cause that I care deeply about.
If we were to come back to you in, let's say, 10, 20 years, and we were to say Hugo is, and there's a blank, what is it that you want your legacy to kind of be known for when we come back?
I think maybe this is like a very non-traditional answer, but or maybe it is a very traditional answer, but I just want to be remembered as somebody who kind of shared happiness and was friendly and helpful. Like honestly, like I think career is important, but what's more important to me is like making a positive impact on those people around you and making making those kind of personal bonds that people will remember. I think work is important, but work isn't everything, and career isn't everything. So that's the impact that I would like to leave, or the legacy that I would like to leave.
Thank you so much, for your time. Great perspectives, great color on, going to Ivy, figuring out exactly, what you want to do, even if, it might not be your forever plan. You talked a lot about international perspectives. Talked about the people skills, things like that. Do you have any, closing remarks or words of wisdom for us before we close?
I mean, just enjoy life and let the random things are gonna hit you in life, but just take them in stride and do the things that make you happy.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you everyone else so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week. See you later.